Hi everyone, how have you been? I truly hope from the bottom of my heart that you're doing okay and doing your best in life. For those of you who recently celebrated, such as this past Christmas or are preparing to Chinese New Year, for example,
Happy Hanukkah, Kwezi Kwanzaa, a tip-top tet, and a solemn, dignified Ramadan. Now a word from my God, our sponsor.
I wish you nothing but joy and fulfillment. I hope this season brought or will bring you all a sense of magic, hope, and love into your lives. And speaking of love, that's exactly what I want to talk about today. Not just love as an emotion, but love as something sacred. Love as a force that builds. Love as something that uplifts you into new dimensions of existence. Simply put, today I want to talk about the ontology of love in Kishimoto's works, something he himself quietly revisited in what is now no longer so new anymore, the Minato One Shot, the Whorl Within the Spiral.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yes, I know, I'm very late with this review, but you know me, I don't like rushing to be first. I like to sit with things, to ruminate, to observe the surface, see what it reflects back to me at face value, and then dive deeper, letting the ocean of thought wash over me until the deeper message reveals itself. And that's exactly what I did with the Minato One Shot. So, like always, let's dive in. There's something immediately captivating about Minato's One Shot. On the surface, it's a warm, nostalgic return to Minato's youth, how he fell in love, how he created the Rasengan, how he unknowingly shaped the future. When it released, the reception was overwhelmingly positive. Fans loved it, critics loved it. Longtime readers felt that familiar comfort, the feeling of being back inside Kishimoto's world, where love, sacrifice, humor, and tragedy can coexist effortlessly. At face value, it feels like a celebration of Naruto as a whole. We see echoes of many relationships we already know and love. Kushina, hiding behind a tree, watching Minato train, immediately reminiscent of Hinata doing the same with Naruto back in the day. The hospital scene where Kushina hugs Minato after he wakes from his battle with Kurama, visually echoing Sakura hugging Sasuke after he awakens from the Tsukuyomi his brother put him in, with Naruto watching silently from the background. The witnesses, Tsunade in both cases, and Jiraiya in just one of them. Then we have Kushina in her Kyuubi form, accidentally hurting Minato, reminiscent of Naruto losing control and hurting Sakura in Shippuden when she ran towards him not in fear but in love, trying to take his pain away. The same impulse she showed in part 1 towards Sasuke in the Forest of Death when he was being consumed by Orochimaru's cursed seal. At surface level, it almost feels like Kishimoto is weaving MinaKushi, NaruSaku, Naruhina, and Sasusaku into one unified nostalgic tapestry. Perhaps a subtle message of peace towards the fandom space that fought so ardently on this very matter, or Kishimoto's own mischievousness, who knows? But if we stop there, it's easy to say Kishimoto mixed all the pairings together, but that's only the surface, because underneath it there's something else entirely, a layer of symbolism Kishimoto returned to, one he hasn't touched openly in years.
It's time.
There must be something. What was the reason we bought those bags?
He said we were mediocre.
That's it. He made us feel special.
Yeah, he did. I'm going back to buy more bags.
No, wait, Patrick.
When you slow down, when you stop reading this story at face value, you start to notice it in the emotional beats, in the dialogue, in the expressions Kishimoto chooses to draw. The relationship being mirrored most consistently through Minato and Kushina is not Hinata and Naruto, nor Sakura and Sasuke. It's Naruto and Sakura. And it's hidden deliberately beneath visual echoes that resemble many pairings but structurally resonate with only one. he hides this meaning beneath layers of direct visual mirroring, scenes that appear interchangeable across several pairings at first glance. But when you look at it through resonance, they resonate fully with only one when examined through the logic of his storytelling.
What the hell are you talking about? He's still alive!
Oh, it was very moving, although that could be the morphine talking. I love everybody right now.
In his structural storytelling, the imagery itself may overlap, but the emotional logic, motivations, and narrative consequences align with only one pairing when traced across the story's internal mechanics. He is mapping emotional vectors across time, connecting points and lines into larger thematic structures, and this is how he creates dimensionality within a two-dimensional medium, by connecting repeated emotional beats across time and space, allowing visual similarities to act as entry points, while the deeper thematic structures guides the reader towards a singular, coherent expression of long-term transformative love. In doing so, Kishimoto transforms flat 2D panels into multi-dimensional space that transcends the boundaries of its medium, reaching its readers, communicating the deeper architecture of love as he envisions it. And that's where the geometry of love comes in. And once you see it, everything starts pointing back to NaruSaku, even MinaKushi's love story and the creation of Rasengan. How? Let me explain.
Acho que tenho que te agradecer por ter curado o Naruto. Então, você é a namorada do Naruto?
Hã? Sim, acho que dá pra dizer isso. Fecha essa matraca! Não desperdice energia falando!
In the One Shot, Minato learns a new technique for one reason only: to protect Kushina. That's the emotional frame of the story, but narratively it's a deliberate echo. The emotional beat Kishimoto originally explored to Sakura in early Shippuden, her wish to reach Hashirama Senju levels of power in order to protect Naruto from the suffering caused by Kurama, reappears later almost intact within Minato and Kushina's story. This is the same structural pattern I identified over a decade ago in my commonly known theory called Kishimoto foreshadowing Sakura's development via Hashirama Senju 1 and 2, which I wrote not necessarily as a prediction of plot, although many of my theories did become canon, but as an identification of a recurring pattern in his narrative mechanics. We can't say with certainty that this was the exact storyline Kishimoto ultimately intended for Sakura, but we can say, based on his own admission in the Kobayashi interview back in 2014, that the plans he had for Sakura's character were altered or abandoned due to popularity considerations.
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb!
In that context, MinaKushi functions as a new narrative vessel, a way for Kishimoto to express an emotional and thematic beat he had already written in NaruSaku, but this time without reigniting the same fandom resistance, as he now uses a more safe container to express it. But the intention never disappeared. The parallel is still there. Minato creating the Rasengan to protect the girl he loves mirrors Sakura's abandoned idea to reach overwhelmingly levels of power only the likes of Hashirama Senju attained, not for glory but to protect the boy she loved or was clearly falling in love with. Two red threads circling the same point, two timelines nearly touching, one left unfinished, the other one revisited decades later in a single short chapter.
How about we talk about something else? Like your name! Don't you worry your little head. Your new name can be anything!
Then comes the name, Rasengan. But first, it's the Ice Pop inspired Nimbus Jiraiya Twin World Sphere. At first glance, it sounds ridiculous, chaotic, comedic, almost unserious. That's how the story itself frames it. And that's exactly why it's easy to miss what's hidden inside of it. Because that name is pure symbolism, and beneath the silliness, it hides its power. To understand it, I invite you to look back at the language that's being used and truly understand the power behind its name. On the surface, the Ice Pop and Jiraiya parts are clear symbolic references, but what about the others? Well, let's ask ourselves a series of questions to help us reveal the hidden truth behind the language. What's a whorl if not a pattern of spirals, also most commonly known as concentric circles? And if a spiral represents the Uzumaki clan symbol, what's the geometrical shape we know represents Haruno's, if not the circle? Next, we have the sphere. What is a sphere if not the 3D equivalent of a 2D circle? As such, the sphere is nothing more than a circle elevated into three-dimensional point of view. The Haruno crest, the circle, in spiraling motion, the Uzumaki symbol, merged together, no longer flat in 2D, but alive in 3D. And the nimbus?
Huh? Fala, nimbus.
A halo, a ring of light around the sun. Once again, Kishimoto carrying us back to the Haruno symbol in 2D, the same shape the seal of the sun itself had, the one Naruto received from Hagoromo, both forming the theme of solar romantic partnership, reminiscing of Kishimoto's two suns motif, and twin, the final piece carrying us towards that two suns duality, two souls intertwined, connected by the red thread of fate. In a single joke name, Kishimoto encodes the shared cosmology of MinaKushi and NaruSaku, spirals and circles, motion and elevation, duality and unity, all wrapped in the warm embrace of solar symbolism. A silent guardian of the heavens, sharing its life force daily with all of us. This is the geometry of love, viewed from above. And when you look at it from there, something important becomes clear. These shapes, these spirals, these twin suns, they aren't mere decorations. Each symbol encodes a structure of love, a way of being, a force that persists beyond the immediate story. They are the visible traces of the deeper architecture Kishimoto has been weaving quietly across time and generations.
Wow.
I've recently had a multi-dimensional makeover. I control space, matter, and now that that dumb baby's out of the way, time itself. But I wasn't always this way.
Kishimoto is not speaking in the language of opposites here. This isn't light versus darkness. This isn't balance through contrast. This is light recognizing light. The sun does not need the moon to be complete. The moon exists to reflect what is already sourced from the sun. But Kishimoto's two-sun symbolism points somewhere else entirely, to a union that does not compensate for lack, but reunites what was already whole. That's why this geometry doesn't rely on polarity. It doesn't stabilize or destabilize power, it amplifies it. It doesn't regulate or dysregulate emotion, it expands being. This is love not as balance, but as fullness. Not halves completing each other, but equals recognizing each other as sources. And this is an important distinction to make, because when love appears in this story as something that quote-unquote fills, it is not feeling as ontological lack, it is reinforcing structure. In Kishimoto's symbolism, containment creates pressure, pressure creates fragmentation, and love functions as the force that prevents that fragmentation from taking hold.
This is inevitable.
Two suns do not unite because one is dimmer than the other. They align so their light remains coherent under strain. This is not completion through absence, but preservation through resonance. And once you understand that distinction, the symbolism in Minato's One Shot stops reading like nostalgia and starts reading like remembrance. And this is exactly what Mito teaches Kushina. Turning back to that scene between Mito and Kushina walking up the stairs, Mito sitting with Kushina, speaking of love as she lovingly looks at Hashirama's statue. That discussion was always more than just advice. It's the scene I kept returning to over and over again. Mito wasn't describing ordinary love. I could tell ever since I saw it. It's the scene I ruminated about the most. I felt that Kishimoto was telling us something through that scene, but I didn't understand exactly what it was. Not in its fullness, at least. Initially, I understood its face value, but what was there more to it, I asked myself. I knew it was philosophy wrapped inside a grandmother's wisdom, but the scene felt heavier, like it hides more valuable wisdom behind it. But what was the wisdom that this crone was teaching the young maiden? And after some time of contemplating over it, it dawned on me, as if the heaven itself shined this truth in my heart. Mito was describing transcendence. It was love as elevation, as expansion to a new state of being, the power that gods themselves are made, perhaps. She was describing movement between dimensions, and in that moment I understood. This was the power of ontological love shaping the very dimensions of being that Kishimoto is telling us about. And how does he express this? Through the code of his language, the sacredness of geometry that defines the space we live in. This is why the Rasengan carries so much symbolic weight. It's not just a jutsu. Is Minato materializing Mito's philosophy? And here we must consider another layer, the love stories that Kishimoto passes down across generations. Beyond symbols and technique, this architecture of love extends across generations. That's why Jiraiya's presence in the story matters, because beyond his role as a master, his love story, unfinished, unfulfilled, becomes legacy, a love that reaches completion through continuation. Jiraiya and Tsunade were never halves seeking completion. They were two fully realized forces whose love existed in tension, not absence. And that love, precisely because it remains unconsumed, was passed forward. In Minato, Jiraiya's teachings find form. In Naruto and Sakura, the emotional architecture resurfaces. This is how Kishimoto treats love across generations, a fullness that seeks to radiate continuation, an heirloom, a force strong enough to be inherited from Hashirama to Mito, to Jiraiya and Tsunade, towards Minato and Kushina, radiating in Naruto and Sakura. The inherited love story that gave Naruto his name and got mirrored in Naruto and Sakura's romantic setup. Elderly wisdom about love passed down from one generation to another. And as such, love becomes protection, protection becomes power, power becomes form. And that form just happens to merge the symbolic crests of Naruto and Sakura, the Uzumaki spiral and Haruno circle, both elevated into 3D. You could basically say Naruto's life and Sakura's heart united into one technique long before either of them are born. A legacy meant to continue, but one Kishimoto ultimately backpedaled on in the end. Still, the blueprint remains, and once you see it, you can't unsee it.
我心碎，我想告诉你，如果有来生，我还是会选择和你一起报税，开心一点。
Minato's One Shot isn't just a story about a genius inventing a technique. It's a demonstration of the structure Kishimoto consistently builds into his worlds. The spirals, the circles, the suns, the intersection of motion and form. These aren't accidental. They are part of the architecture, the code that underpins his storytelling, repeated across characters, generations, and timelines. Look at the pairings themselves. HashiMito, JiraTsu, MinaKushi, NaruSaku. They are not isolated romances, but structural markers. Each echoes the same logic. Two fully realized forces aligned, creating resonance, passing legacy forward. Every relationship, every technique, every echo across the series is an expression of this internal logic. The two suns, the Rasengan, the crests, all carry the same signature, a conscious weaving of structure and meaning. All of this is part of Kishimoto's authorial DNA, quietly recurring, waiting to be recognized. By stepping back, we see that the patterns we've traced, the geometry, the legacy, the alignment, the forces are not isolated. They are frameworks on which Kishimoto constructs the emotional and narrative architecture of his universes. And that framework itself is as much part of the story as the characters who inhabit it.
Anyway.
So, what was the underneath of Minato learning the Rasengan, of Mito's lesson to Kushina? Love is sacred geometry, a force that lifts you from one dimension of being into another, a force that creates, transforms, and protects. That's why Minato's One Shot is ultimately a love letter, from Hashirama and Mito passed down to Jiraiya and Tsunade, from Minato and Kushina to Naruto to Sakura, and to the original NaruSaku symbolism that shaped the story from the very beginning. The Rasengan was never just a jutsu. It was a message, a halo, a sphere, a union, a promise. And once you see the geometry, you can't unsee it. Even though Kishimoto changes the vessels of his creative expression, he always returns to the core of his philosophy and thematic architecture. The pairings, HashiMito, JiraTsu, MinaKushi, NaruSaku, are not incidental. They are the structural signature of his universe, a recurring scaffold through which he channels the same principles of love, fullness, and generational continuity. And once you understand the code behind his architecture, reading his stories becomes a multi-dimensional experience. And like Mito's lesson teaches Kushina, you transcend the limits of the medium, finding yourself in a dimension only few get to access. One where love as sacred force shapes the geometry of being itself. Alright, my fellow travelers, through the path of the spiral, that's the architecture we've traced for today. We've learned that Kishimoto's stories are more than just plots, they're systems of meaning, coded messages about love, legacy, and existence itself, all written in the language of sacred geometry. If this journey into Kishimoto's sacred geometry of love resonated with you, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it and take all the actions necessary to support the creator out. It allows me to keep exploring these hidden patterns, decoding the architecture of his universe, and mapping the unseen dimensions that give his stories their depth. And as such, I get to build these longer, slower, and more contemplative deep dives. I've learned that stories like these deserve time, space, and attention. They aren't meant to be consumed quickly. They ask to be sat with, to be contemplated. This allows space for analysis that isn't rushed, flattened, or reduced, but honored. With that being said, I invite you to leave your thoughts in the comments down below, not to convince, but to contemplate. Where do you see the red thread moving? How do HashiMito, JiraTsu, MinaKushi, and NaruSaku echo within the same architectural language? How does the geometry of love shape the world around them and the hearts of the characters we follow? Remember, these stories are more than just panels and dialogue. They are meditations on being, love, and legacy. Blueprints of a sacred force that elevates, transforms, and preserves. Step into that space with me. Contemplate it. Let it move you, and in doing so, you might just glimpse into the higher dimensions Kishimoto built for us, waiting quietly for those willing to see. I and my editor, Star Writer, would really appreciate that, and thank you for it. Like always, until the next time, I thank you for giving me this time of your life to watch my video. See ya on the next one!
I have a catheter inside me, so I can't currently leave, but please note that as soon as I'm able to in a normal fashion, I am—
That's okay, you don't have to make her into some kind of super Godzilla.
love, chat.